Chapter 15 of The Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Noma comes to Hafela. Hosa advanced to the veranda and bowed to the white man with grave dignity. "Be seated," said Owen. "Will you not eat? Though I have nothing to offer you but these." And he pushed the basket of fruits towards him, adding, "The best of them, I fear, are already gone." "I thank you, no, messenger. Such fruits are not always wholesome at this season of the year. I have known them to breed dysentery." "Indeed," said Owen. "If so, I trust that I may escape. I have suffered from that sickness, and I think that another bout of it would kill me. In the future I will avoid them. But what do you seek with me, Hokosa? Enter and tell me." And he led the way into a little sitting room. "Messenger," said the wizard with deep humility, "I am a proud man. I have been a great man, and it is no light thing to me to humble myself before the face of my conqueror. Yet I am come to this. Today, when I was in audience with the king, craving a small boon of his graciousness, he spoke to me sharp and bitter words. He told me that he had been minded to put me on trial for my life, because of various misdoings which are alleged against me in the past, but that you had pleaded for me, and that for this cause he spared me. I come to thank you for your gentleness, messenger, for I think that had I been in your place, I should have whispered otherwise in the ear of the king." "Say no more of it, friend," said Owen kindly. "We are all of us sinners, and it is my place to push back your ancient sins, not to drag them into the light of day and clamour for their punishment. It is true, I know that you plotted with the Prince Hafela to poison Umsuka the king, for it was revealed to me. It chanced, however, that I was able to recover Umsuka from his sickness, and Hafela is fled, so why should I bring up the deed against you? It is true that you still practice witchcraft, and that you hate and strive against the holy faith which I preach, but you were brought up to wizardry, and have been the priest of another creed, and these things plead for you. Also, Hokosa, I can see the good and evil struggling in your soul, and I pray and I believe that in the end the good will master the evil, that you who have been preeminent in sin will come to be preeminent in righteousness. Oh, be not stubborn, but listen with your ear, and let your heart be softened. The gate stands open, and I am the guide appointed to show you the way without reward or fee. Follow them ere it be too late, that in time to come, when my voice is stilled, you also may be able to direct the feet of wanderers into the paths of peace. It is the hour of prayer. Come with me, I beg of you, and listen to some few words of the message from my lips, and let your spirit be nurtured with them, and the sun of truth arise upon its darkness." Hokosa heard, and before this simple eloquence his wisdom sank confounded. More, his intelligence was stirred, and a desire came upon him to investigate and examine the canons of a creed that could produce such men as this. He made no answer, but waiting while Owen robed himself, he followed him to the chapel. It was full of new-made Christians who crowded even the doorways, but they gave place to him, wondering. Then the service began, a short and simple service. First, Owen offered up some prayer for the welfare of the infant church, for the conversion of the unbelieving, for the safety of the king and the happiness of the people. Then John, the messenger's first disciple, read aloud from a manuscript a portion of the Scripture which his master had translated. It was St. Paul's exposition of the resurrection from the dead, and the grandeur of its thoughts and language were by no means lost upon Hokosa, who, savage and heathen though he might be, was also a man of intellect. The reading over, Owen addressed the congregation, taking for his text, "Thy sin shall find thee out." Being now a master of the language, he preached very well and earnestly, and indeed the subject was not difficult to deal with, in the presence of an audience many of whose pasts had been steeped in iniquities of no common kind. As he talked of judgment to come for the unrepentant, some of his hearers groaned and even wept, and when, changing his note, he dwelt upon the blessed future state of those who earned forgiveness, their faces were lighted up with joy. But perhaps among all those gathered before him there were none more deeply interested than Hokosa and one other, that woman to whom he had sold the poison, and who, as it chanced, sat next to him. Hokosa, watching her face as he was skilled to do, saw the thrusts of the preacher go home, and grew sure that already in her jealous haste she had found opportunity to sprinkle the medicine upon her rival's food. She believed it to be but a charm indeed, yet knowing that in using such charms she had done wickedly, she trembled beneath the words of denunciation, and, rising at length, crept from the chapel. "Truly, her sin will find her out," thought Hokosa to himself, and then, in a strange, half impersonal fashion, he turned his thoughts to the consideration of his own case. Would his sin find him out, he wondered? Before he could answer that question, it was necessary first to determine whether or no he had committed a sin. The man before him, that gentle and yet impassioned man, bore in his vitals the seed of death which he, Hokosa, had planted there. Was it wrong to have done this? It depended by which standard the deed was judged. According to his own code, the code on which he had been educated, and which hitherto he had followed with exactness, it was not wrong. That code taught the necessity of self-aggrandizement, or at least, and at all costs, the necessity of self-preservation. This white preacher stood in his path. He had humiliated him, Hokosa, and in the end, either of himself or through his influences, it was probable that he would destroy him. Therefore he must strike before in his own person he received a mortal blow, and having no other means at his command, he struck through treachery and poison. That was his law, which for many generations had been followed and respected by his class with the tacit assent of the nation. According to this law, then, he had done no wrong. But now the victim by the altar, who did not know that already he was bound upon the altar, preached a new and a very different doctrine, under which, were it to be believed, he, Hokosa, was one of the worst of sinners. The matter then resolved itself to this: which of these two rules of life was the right rule? Which of them should a man follow to satisfy his conscience and to secure his abiding welfare? Apart from the motives that swayed him, as a mere matter of ethics, this problem interested Hokosa not a little, and he went homewards determined to solve it if he might. That could be done in one way only, by a close examination of both systems. The first he knew well; he had practised it for nearly 40 years. Of the second he had but an inkling. Also, if he would learn more of it, he must make haste, seeing that its exponent in some short while would cease to be in a position to set it out. "I trust that you will come again," said Owen to Hokosa as they left the chapel. "Yes, indeed, messenger," answered the wizard. "I will come every day, and if you permit it, I will attend your private teachings also, for I accept nothing without examination, and I greatly desire to study this new doctrine of yours, root and flower and fruit." On the morrow Noma started upon her journey. As the matrons who accompanied her gave out with a somewhat suspicious persistency, its ostensible object was to visit the Mount of Purification, and there, by fastings and solitude, to purge herself of the sin of having given birth to a stillborn child. For amongst savage peoples such an accident is apt to be looked upon as little short of a crime, or at the least as indicating that the woman concerned is the object of the indignation of spirits who need to be appeased. To this mount Noma went, and there performed the customary rites. Little wonder, she thought to herself, that the spirits were angry with her, seeing that yonder in the burying ground of kings she had dared to break in upon their rest. From the place of purification she travelled on 10 days' journey with her companions, till they reached the mountain fastness where Hafela had established himself. The town and its surroundings were of extraordinary strength, and so well guarded that it was only after considerable difficulty and delay that the women were admitted. Hearing of her arrival, and that she had words for him, Hafela sent for Noma at once, receiving her by night and alone in his principal hut. She came and stood before him, and he looked at her beauty with admiring eyes, for he could not forget the woman whom the cunning of Hokosa had forced him to put away. "Whence come you, pretty one?" he asked, "and wherefore come you? Are you weary of your husband, that you fly back to me? If so, you are welcome indeed, for know, Noma, that I still love you." "Ay, Prince, I am weary of my husband, sure enough. But I do not fly to you, for he holds me fast to him with bonds that you cannot understand, and fast to him while he lives I must remain."
"What hinders, Noma, that having got you here, I should keep you here? The cunning and magic of Hokosa may be great, but they will need to be still greater to win you from my arms."
"This hinders, Prince, that you are playing for a higher stake than that of a woman's love, and if you deal thus by me and my husband, then of a surety you will lose the game."
"What stake, Noma?"
"The stake of the crown of the People of Fire."
"And why should I lose if I take you as a wife?"
"Because Hokosa, seeing that I do not return, and learning from his spies why I do not return, will warn the king, and by many means bring all your plans to nothing. Listen now to the words of Hokosa that he has set between my lips to deliver to you." And she repeated to him all the message without fault or fail.
"Say it again," he said, and she obeyed.
Then he answered:
"Truly the skill of Hokosa is great, and well he knows how to set a snare. But I think that if by his counsel I should spring the bird, he will be too clever a man to keep upon the threshold of my throne. He who sets one snare may set twain, and he who sits by the threshold may desire to enter the house of kings, wherein there is no space for two to dwell."
"Is this the answer that I am to take back to Hokosa?" asked Noma. "It will scarcely bind him to your cause, Prince, and I wonder that you dare to speak it to me who am his wife."
"I dare to speak it to you, Noma, because although you be his wife, all wives do not love their lords, and I think that, perchance in days to come, you would choose rather to hold the hand of a young king than that of a witch doctor sinking into eld. Thus shall you answer Hokosa. You shall say to him that I have heard his words, and that I find them very good, and will walk along the path which he has made. Here before you I swear by the oath that may not be broken, the sacred oath calling down ruin upon my head should I break one word of it, that if by his aid I succeed in this great venture, I will pay him the price he asks. After myself, the king, he shall be the greatest man among the people. He shall be general of the armies. He shall be captain of the council and head of the doctors, and to him shall be given half the cattle of Nodwengo. Also into his hand I will deliver all those who cling to this faith of the Christians, and if it please him, he shall offer them as a sacrifice to his God. This I swear, and you, Noma, are witness to the oath. Yet it may chance that after he, Hokosa, has gathered up all this pomp and greatness, he himself shall be gathered up by death, that harvest man whom soon or late will garner every ear." And he looked at her meaningly. "It may be so, Prince," she answered. "It may be so," he repeated. "And when?"
"When it is so, then, Prince, we will talk together, but not till then. Nay, touch me not, for were he to command me, Hokosa has this power over me, that I must show him all that you have done, keeping nothing back. Let me go now to the place that is made ready for me, and afterwards you shall tell me again and more fully the words that I must say to Hokosa my husband." On the morrow Hafela held a secret council of his great men, and the next day an embassy departed to Nodwengo the king, taking to him that message which Hokosa, through Noma his wife, had put into the lips of the prince. 20 days later the embassy returned, saying that it pleased the king to grant the prayer of his brother Hafela, and bringing with it the tidings that the white man, messenger, had fallen sick, and it was thought that he would die. So in due course the women and children of the people of Hafela started upon their journey towards the new land where it was given out that they should live, and with them went Noma, purposing to leave them as they drew near the gates of the great place of the king. A while after, Hafela and his impis followed with carriers bearing their fighting shields in bundles, and having their stabbing spears rolled up in mats. End of chapter 15. The Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Repentance of Hokosa. Hokosa kept his promise. On the morrow of his first attendance there, he was again to be seen in the chapel, and after the service was over he waited on Owen at his house, and listened to his private teaching. Day by day he appeared thus, till at length he became master of the whole doctrine of Christianity, and discovered that that which at first had struck him as childish and even monstrous now presented itself to him in a new and very different light. The conversion of Hokosa came upon him through the gate of reason, not as is usual among savages, and some who are not savage, by that of the emotions. Given the position of a universe torn and groaning beneath the dual rule of good and evil, two powers of well nigh equal potency, he found no great difficulty in accepting this tale of the self-sacrifice of the God of Good, that he might wring the race he loved out of the conquering grasp of the God of Ill. There was a simple majesty about this scheme of redemption which appealed to one side of his nature. Indeed, Hokosa felt that under certain conditions, and in a more limited fashion, he would have been capable of attempting as much himself. Once his reason was satisfied, the rest followed in a natural sequence. Within 3 weeks from the hour of his first attendance at the chapel, Hokosa was at heart a Christian. He was a Christian, although as yet he did not confess it, but he was also the most miserable man among the nation of the Sons of Fire. The iniquities of his past life had become abominable to him, but he had committed them in ignorance, and he understood that they were not beyond forgiveness. Yet high above them all towered one colossal crime which, as he believed, could never be pardoned to him in this world or the next. He was the treacherous murderer of the messenger of God. He was in the very act of silencing the voice that had proclaimed truth in the dark places of his soul and the dull ears of his countrymen. The deed was done. No power on earth could save his victim. Within a week from the day of eating that fatal fruit, Owen began to sicken. Then the dysentery had seized him, which slowly but surely was wasting out his life. Yet he, the murderer, was helpless, for with this form of the disease no medicine could cope. With agony in his heart, an agony that was shared by thousands of the people, Hokosa watched the decrease of the white man's strength, and reckoned the days that would elapse before the end. Having such sin as thus upon his soul, though Owen entreated him earnestly, he would not permit himself to be baptized. Twice he went near to consenting, but on each occasion an ominous and terrible incident drove him from the door of mercy. Once, when the words "I will" were almost on his lips, a woman broke in upon their conference bearing a dying boy in her arms. "Save him," she implored. "Save him, messenger, for he is my only son." Owen looked at him and shook his head. "How came he like this?" he asked. "I know not, messenger, but he has been sick ever since he ate of a certain fruit which you gave to him." And she recalled to his mind the incident of the throwing of a fruit to the child which she had witnessed. "I remember," said Owen. "It is strange, but I also have been sick from the day that I ate of those fruits. Yes, and you, Hokosa, warned me against them." Then he blessed the boy and prayed over him till he died. But when afterwards he looked round for Hokosa, it was to find that he had gone. Some 8 days later, having to a certain extent recovered from this shock, Hokosa went one morning to Owen's house and talked to him. "Messenger," he said, "is it necessary to baptism that I should confess all my sins to you? If so, I can never be baptized, for there is wickedness upon my hands which I am unable to tell into the ear of living man." Owen thought and answered, "It is necessary that you should repent all of your sins, and that you should confess them to heaven. It is not necessary that you should confess them to me, who am but a man like yourself." "Then I will be baptized," said Hokosa with a sigh of relief. At this moment, as it chanced, their interview was again interrupted, for runners came from the king requesting the immediate presence of the messenger, if he were well enough to attend, upon a matter connected with the trial of a woman for murder. Thinking that he might be of service, Owen, leaning on the shoulder of Hokosa, for already he was too weak to walk far, crept to the litter which was waiting for him, and was borne to the place of judgment that was before the house of the king. Hokosa followed, more from curiosity than for any other reason, for he had heard of no murder being committed, and his old desire to be acquainted with everything that passed was still strong on him. The people made way for him, and he seated himself in the first line of spectators, immediately opposite to the king and 3 other captains who were judges in the case. So soon as Owen had joined the judges, the prisoner was brought before them, and to his secret horror Hokosa recognized in her that woman to whom he had given the poison in exchange for the basket of fruit. Now it seemed to Hokosa that his doom was on him, for she would certainly confess that she had the drug from him. He thought of flight, only to reject the thought, for to fly would be to acknowledge himself an accessory. No, he would brazen it out, for after all his word was as good as hers. With the prisoner came an accuser, her husband, who seemed sick, and he it was who opened the case against her. "This woman," he said, "was my wife. I divorced her for barrenness, as I have a right to do according to our ancient law, and I took another woman to wife, her half-sister. This woman was jealous. She plagued me continually and insulted her sister, so that I was forced to drive her away. After that she came to my house, and though they said nothing of it at the time, she was seen by 2 servants of mine to sprinkle something in the bowl wherein our food was cooking. Subsequently my wife, this woman's half-sister, was taken ill with dysentery. I also was taken ill with dysentery, but I still live to tell this story before you, O King, and your judges, though I know not for how long I live. My wife died yesterday, and I buried her this morning. I accuse the woman of having murdered her, either by witchcraft or by means of a medicine which she sprinkled on the food, or by both. I have spoken." "Have you anything to say?" asked the king of the prisoner. "Are you guilty of the crime whereof this man who was your husband charges you, or does he lie?" Then the woman answered in a low and broken voice, "I am guilty, King. Listen to my story." And she told it all as she told it to Hokosa. "I am guilty," she added, "and may the great man in the sky, of whom the messenger has taught us, forgive me. My sister's blood is upon my hands, and for aught I know, the blood of my husband yonder will also be on my hands. I seek no mercy; indeed, it is better that I should die. But I would say this in self-defence, that I did not think to kill my sister. I believed that I was giving to her a potion which would cause her husband to hate her, and no more." Here she looked round, and her eyes met those of Hokosa. "Who told you that this was so?" asked one of the judges. "A witch doctor," she answered, "from whom I bought the medicine in the old days long ago, when Umsuka was king." Hokosa gasped. Why should this woman have spared him? No further question was asked of her, and the judges consulted together. At length the king spoke. "Woman," he said, "you are condemned to die. You will be taken to the doom tree and there be hanged. Out of those who were assembled to try you, 2, the messenger and myself, have given their vote in favour of mercy, but the majority think otherwise. They say that a law has been passed against murder by means of witchcraft and secret medicine, and that should we let you go free, the people will make a mock of that law. So be it. Go in peace. Tomorrow you must die, and may forgiveness await you elsewhere." "I ask nothing else," said the woman. "It is best that I should die." Then they led her away. As she passed Hokosa, she turned and looked him full in the eyes, till he dropped his head abashed. Next morning she was executed, and he learned that her last words were, "Let it come to the ears of him who sold me the poison, telling me that it was but a harmless drug, that as I hope to be forgiven, so I forgive him, believing that my silence may win for him time for repentance before he follows on the road I tread." Now when Hokosa heard these words, he shut himself up in his house for 3 days, giving out that he was sick. Nor would he go near to Owen, being altogether without hope, and not believing that baptism or any other rite could avail to purge such crimes as his. Truly his sin had found him out, and the burden of it was intolerable. So intolerable did it become that at length he determined to be done with it. He could live no more. He would die, and by his own hand, before he was called upon to witness the death of the man whom he had murdered. To this end he made his preparations. For Noma he left no message, for though his heart still hungered after her, he knew well that she hated him and would rejoice at his death. When all was ready, he sat down to think a while, and as he thought, a man entered his hut, saying that the messenger desired to see him. At first he was minded not to go. Then it occurred to him that it would be well if he could die with a clean heart. Why should he not tell all to the white man, and before he could be delivered up to justice, take that poison which he had prepared? It was impossible that he should be forgiven, yet he desired that his victim should learn how deep was his sorrow and repentance before he proved it by preceding him to death. So he rose and went. He found Owen in his house, lying in a rude chair and propped up by pillows of bark. Now he was wasted almost to a shadow, and in the pale pinched face his dark eyes, always large and spiritual, shone with unnatural lustre, while his delicate hands were so thin that when he held them up in blessing the light showed through them. "Welcome, friend," he said. "Tell me, why have you deserted me of late? Have you been ill?" "No, messenger," answered Hokosa, "that is, not in my body. I have been sick at heart, and therefore I have not come." "What, Hokosa, do your doubts still torment you? I thought that my prayers had been heard, and that power had been given me to set them at rest forever. Man, let me hear the trouble, and swiftly, for cannot you, who are a doctor, see that I shall not be here for long to talk with you? My days are numbered, Hokosa, and my work is almost done." "I know it," answered Hokosa, "and, messenger, my days are also numbered." "How is this?" asked Owen, "seeing that you are well and strong? Does an enemy put you in danger of your life?" "Yes, messenger, and I myself am that enemy, for today I, who am no longer fit to live, must die by my own hand. Nay, listen, and you will say that I do well, for before I go I would tell you all. Messenger, you are doomed, are you not? Well, it was I who doomed you. That fruit which you ate a while ago was poisoned, and by my hand, for I am a master of such arts. From the beginning I hated you, as well I might, for had you not worsted me, and torn power from my grasp, and placed the people and the king under the rule of another god? Therefore, when all else failed, I determined to murder you, and I did the deed by means of that woman who not long ago was hung for the killing of her sister, though in truth she was innocent." And he told him what had passed between him and the woman, and told him also of the plot which he had hatched to kill Nodwengo and the Christians, and to set Hafela on the throne. "She was innocent," he went on, "but I am guilty. How guilty, you and I know alone. Do you remember that day when you ate the fruit, how after it I accompanied you to the church yonder and listened to your preaching? 'Your sin shall find you out,' you said, and of a surety mine has found me out. For, messenger, it came about that in listening to you then and afterwards, I grew to love you and to believe the words you taught, and therefore am I of all men the most miserable, and therefore must I, who have been great and the counsellor of kings, perish miserably by the death of a dog. Now curse me and let me go." End of chapter 16. Of the Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Loosing of Noma. When Owen heard that it was Hokosa who had poisoned him, he groaned and hid his face in his hands, and thus he remained till the evil tale was finished. Now he lifted his head and spoke, but not to Hokosa. "O God," he said, "I thank Thee that at the cost of my poor life Thou hast been pleased to lead this sinner towards the gate of righteousness, and to save alive those whom Thou hast sent me to gather to Thy fold." Then he looked at Hokosa and said, "Unhappy man, is not your cup full enough of crime, and have you not sufficiently tempted the mercy of heaven, that you would add to all your evil deeds that of self-murder?" "It is better to die today by my own hand," answered Hokosa, "than tomorrow among the mockery of the people to fall victim to your vengeance, messenger." "Vengeance? Did I speak to you of vengeance? Who am I that I should take vengeance upon one who has repented? Hokosa, freely do I forgive you all, even as in some few days I hope to be forgiven. Freely and fully from my heart do I forgive you, nor shall my lips tell one word of the sin that you have worked against me." Now when Hokosa heard those words, for a moment he stared stupefied. Then he fell down upon his knees before Owen, and bowing his head till it touched the teacher's feet, he burst into bitter weeping. "Rise and hearken," said Owen gently. "Weep not because I have shown kindness to you, for that is my duty and no more. But for your sins in your own heart weep now and forever. Yet for your comfort I tell you that if you do this, of a surety they shall be forgiven to you. Hosa, you have indeed lost that which you loved, and henceforth you must follow after that which you did not desire. In the very grave of error you have found truth, and from the depths of sin you shall pluck righteousness. Ay, that cross which you deemed accursed shall lift you up on high, for by it you shall be saved." Hosa heard and shivered. "Who set those words between your lips, messenger?" he whispered. "Who set them, Hosa? Nay, I know not, or rather I know well. He set them who teaches us to speak all things that are good." "It must be so indeed," replied Hosa. "Yet I have heard them before. I have heard them from the lips of the dead, and with them went this command, that when they fell upon my ears again, I should take them for a sign and let my heart be turned." "Tell me that tale," said Owen. So he told him, and this time it was the white man who trembled. "Horrible has been your witchcraft, O son of darkness," said Owen when he had finished. "Yet it would seem that it was permitted to you to find truth in the pit of sorcery. Obey, obey, and let your heart be turned. The dead told you that you should be set high above the nation and its king, and that saying I cannot read, though it may be fulfilled in some fashion of which today you do not think. At the least, the other saying is true, that in the end comes judgment, and that there shall the sin and the atonement strive together. Therefore for judgment prepare yourself. And now depart, for I must talk with the king as to this matter of the onslaught of Hafela." "Then that will be the signal for my death. For what king can forgive one who has plotted such treachery against him?" said Hosa. "Fear not," answered Owen. "I will soften his heart. Go you into the church and pray, for there you shall be less tempted. But before you go, swear to me that you will work no evil on yourself." "I swear it, messenger, since now I desire to live, if only for a while, seeing that death shuts every door." Then he went to the church and waited there. An hour later he was summoned, and found the king seated with Owen. "Man," said Nodwengo, "I am told by the messenger here that you have knowledge of a plot which my brother the Prince Hafela has made to fall treacherously upon me and put me and my people to the spear. How you come to be acquainted with the plot, and what part you have played in it, I will not now inquire, for so much I have promised to the messenger. Yet I warn you, it will be well that you should tell me all you know, and that should you lie to me or attempt to deceive me, then you shall surely die." "King, hear all the truth," answered Hosa in a voice of desperate calm. "I have knowledge of the plot, for it was I who wove it. But whether or not Hafela will carry it out altogether, I cannot say, for as yet no word has reached me from him. King, this was the plan that I made." And he told him everything. "It is fortunate for you, Hosa," said Nodwengo grimly when he had finished, "that I gave my word to the messenger that no harm should come to you, seeing that you have repented and confessed. This is certain, that Hafela has listened to your evil counsels, for I gave my consent to his flight from this land with all his people, and already his women and children have crossed the mountain path in thousands. Well, this I swear, that their feet shall tread it no more, for where they are, thither he shall go to join them, should he chance to live to do so. Hosa, be gone, and know that day and night you will be watched. Should you so much as dare to approach one of the gates of the great place, that moment you shall die." "Have no fear, O king," said Hosa humbly, "for I have emptied all my heart before you. The past is the past, and cannot be recalled. For the future, while it pleases you to spare me, I am the most loyal of your servants." "Can a man empty a spring with a pitcher?" asked the king contemptuously. "By tomorrow this heart of yours may be full again with the blackest treachery, O master of sin and lies. Many months ago I spared you at the prayer of the messenger, and now at his prayer I spare you again. Yet in doing so I think that I am foolish." "Nay, I will answer for him," broke in Owen. "Let him stay here with me, and set your guard without my gates." "How do I know that he will not murder you, friend?" asked the king. "This man is a snake whom few can nurse with safety." "He will not murder me," said Owen, smiling, "because his heart is turned from evil to good. Also, there is little need to murder a dying man." "Nay, speak not so," said the king hastily. "And as for this man, be it as you will. Come, I must take counsel with my captains, for our danger is near and great." So it came about that Hokosa stayed in the house of Owen. On the morrow the great place was full of the bustle of preparation, and by dawn of the following day an impi of some 17,000 spears had started to ambush Hafela and his force in a certain wooded defile, through which he must pass on his way to the mountain pass where his women and children were gathered. The army was not large, at least in the eyes of the people of Fire, who, before the death of Umsuka and the break-up of the nation, counted their warriors by tens of thousands. But after those events the most of the regiments had deserted to Hafela, leaving to Nodwengo not more than 22,000 spears, upon which he could rely. Of these he kept less than a third to defend the great place against possible attacks, and all the rest he sent to fall upon Hafela far away, hoping there to make an end of him once and for all. This counsel the king took against the better judgment of many of his captains, and, as the issue proved, it was mistaken. When Owen told Hokosa of it, that old general shrugged his shoulders. "The king would have done better to keep his regiments at home," he said, "and fight it out with Hafela here, where he is well prepared. Yonder the country is very wide and broken, and it may well chance that the impi will miss that of Hafela. And then how can the king defend this place with a handful, should the prince burst upon him at the head of 40,000 men? But who am I that I should give counsel for which none seek?" "As God wills, so shall it befall," answered Owen wearily. "But oh, the thought of all this bloodshed breaks my heart. I trust that its beatings may be stilled before my eyes behold the evil hour." On the evening of that day Hokosa was baptized. The ceremony took place not in the church, for Owen was too weak to go there, but in the largest room of his house, and before some few witnesses chosen from the congregation. Even as he was being signed with the sign of the cross, a strange and familiar attraction caused the convert to look up, and behold, before him, watching all with mocking eyes, stood Noma his wife. At length the rite was finished, and the little audience melted away, all save Noma, who stood silent and beautiful as a statue, the light of mockery still gleaming in her eyes. Then she spoke, saying: "I greet you, husband. I have returned from doing your business afar, and if this foolishness is finished, and the white man can spare you, I would talk with you alone." "I greet you, wife," answered Hokosa. "Say out your say, for none are present save us three, and from the messenger here I have no secrets." "What, husband, none? Do you ever talk to him of certain fruit that you ripened in a garden yonder?" "From the messenger I have no secrets," repeated Hokosa in a heavy voice. "Then his heart must be full of them indeed, and it is little wonder that he seems sick," replied Noma, gibing. "Tell me, Hokosa, is it true that you have become a Christian, or would you but fool the white man and his following?" "It is true." At the words her graceful shape was shaken with a little gust of silent laughter. "The wizard has turned saint," she said. "Well then, what of the wizard's wife?" "You were my wife before I became Christian. If the messenger permits it, you can still abide with me." "If the messenger permits it. So you have come to this, Hokosa, that you must ask the leave of another man as to whether or no you should keep your own wife. There is no other thing that I could not have thought of you, but this I would never have believed had I not heard it from your lips. Say now, do you still love me, Hokosa?" "You know well that I love you, now and always," he answered in a voice that sounded like a groan, "as you know that for love of you I have done many sins from which otherwise I should have turned aside." "Grieve not over them, Hokosa. After all, in such a count as yours they will make but little show. Well, if you love me, I hate you, though through your witchcraft your will yet has the mastery of mine. I demand of you now that you should loose that bond, for I do not desire to become a Christian, and surely, O most good and holy man, having one wife already, it will not please you henceforth to live in sin with a heathen woman." Now Hokosa turned to Owen. "In the old days," he said, "I could have answered her, but now I am fallen or raised up. At the least I am changed and cannot. O Prophet of Heaven, tell me what I should do." "Sever the bond that you have upon her and let her go," answered Owen. "This love of yours is unnatural, unholy, and born of witchcraft. Have done with it, or, if you cannot, at the least deny it, for such a woman who hates you, can work you no good. Moreover, since she is a second wife, you, being a Christian, are bound to free her should she so desire." "She can work me no good, Messenger, that I know. But I know also that while she struggles in the net of my will, she can work me no evil. If I loose the net and the fish swims free, it may be otherwise." "Loose it," answered Owen, "and leave the rest to Providence. Henceforth, Hokosa, do right, and take no thought for the morrow is with God, and what He decrees, that shall befall." "I hear you," said Hokosa, "and I obey." For a while he rocked himself to and fro, staring at the ground. Then he lifted his head and spoke. "Woman," he said, "the knot is untied and the spell is broken. Be gone, for I release you and I divorce you. Flesh of my flesh have you been, and soul of my soul, for in the web of sorceries are we knit together. Yet be warned, and presume not too far, for remember that which I have laid down I can take up, and that should I choose to command, you must still obey. Farewell, you are free." Noma heard, and with a sigh of ecstasy she sprang into the air as a slave might do from whom the fetters have been struck off. "Ay," she cried, "I am free. I feel it in my blood. I who have lain in bondage, and the voice of freedom speaks in my heart, and the breath of freedom blows in my nostrils. I am free from you, O dark and accursed man. But herein lies my triumph and revenge. You are not free from me. In obedience to that white fool whom you have murdered, you have loosed me. But you I will not loose, and could not if I would. Listen now, Hokosa, you love me, do you not? Next to this new creed of yours, I am most of all to you. Well, since you have divorced me, I will tell you, I go straight to another man. Now look your last on me, for you love me, do you not?" And she slipped the mantle from her shoulders, and except for her girdle stood before him naked, and smiled. "Well," she went on, resuming her robe, "the last words of those we love are always dear to us. Therefore, Hokosa, you who were my husband, I leave mine with you. You are a coward and a traitor, and your doom shall be that of a coward and a traitor. For my sake you betrayed Umsuka, your king and benefactor. For your own sake you betrayed Nodwengo, who spared you. And now, for the sake of your miserable soul, you have betrayed Hafela to Nodwengo. Nay, I know the tale, do not answer me, but the end of it, that is yet to learn. Lie there, snake, and lick the hand that you have bitten. But I, the bird whom you have loosed, I fly afar, taking your heart with me." And suddenly she turned and was gone. Presently Hokosa spoke in a thick voice. "Messenger," he said, "this cross that you have given me to bear is heavy indeed." "Yes, Hokosa," answered Owen, "for to it your sins are nailed." End of chapter 17. Of The Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Passing of Owen. Once she was outside of Owen's house, Noma did not tarry. First she returned to Hokosa's kraal, where she had already learnt from his head wife, Zinti, and others, the news of his betrayal of the plot of Hafela, of his conversion to the faith of the Christians, and of the march of the impi to ambush the prince. Here she took a little spear, and rolling up in a skin blanket as much dried meat as she could carry, she slipped unnoticed from the kraal. Her object was to escape from the great place, but this she did not try to do by any of the gates, knowing them to be guarded. Some months ago, before she started on her embassy, she had noted a weak spot in the fence, where dogs had torn a hole through which they passed out to hunt at night. To this spot she made her way under cover of the darkness. For though she still greatly feared to be alone at night, her pressing need conquered her fears, and found that the hole was yet there, for a tall weed growing in its mouth had caused it to be overlooked by those whose duty it was to mend the fence. With her assegai she widened it a little, then drew her lithe shape through it, and lying hidden till the guard had passed, climbed the 2 stone walls beyond. Once she was free of the town, she set her course by the stars, and started forward at a steady run. "If my strength holds, I shall yet be in time to warn him," she muttered to herself. "Ah, friend Hosa, this new madness of yours has blunted your wits that once were sharp enough. You have set me free, and now you shall learn how I can use my freedom. Not for nothing have I been your pupil, Hosa the fox." Before the dawn broke, Noma was 30 miles from the great place, and before the next dawn she was 100. At sunset on that second day she stood among mountains. To her right stretched a great defile, a rugged place of rocks and bush, wherein she knew that the regiments of the king were hid in ambush. Perchance she was too late. Perchance the impi of Hafela had already passed to its doom in yonder gorge. Swiftly she ran forward onto the trail which led to the gorge, to find that it had been trodden by many feet, and recently. Moving to and fro, she searched the spoor with her eyes, then rose with a sigh of joy. It was old, and marked the passage of the great company of women and children, and their thousands of cattle, which, in execution of the plot, had travelled this path some days before. Either the impi had not yet arrived, or it had gone by some other road. Weary as she was, Noma followed the old spoor backwards. A mile or more away it crossed the crest of a hog-backed mountain, from whose summit she searched the plain beyond, and not in vain, for there, far beneath her, twinkled the watchfires of the army of Hafela. 3 hours later, a woman, footsore and utterly exhausted, staggered into the camp, and waving aside the spears that were lifted to stab her, demanded to be led to the prince. Presently she was there.
"Who is this woman?"
asked the great warrior, for, haggard as she was with travel, exhaustion, and the terror of her haunted loneliness, he did not know her in the uncertain firelight. "Hafela," she said, "I am Noma, who was the wife of Hosa, and for whole nights and days I have journeyed as no woman ever journeyed before, to tell you of the treachery of Hosa and to save you from your doom."
"What treachery and what doom?"
asked the prince. "Before I answer you that question, Hafela, you must pay me the price of my news."
"Let me hear the price, Noma."
"It is this, prince. First, the head of Hosa, who has divorced me when you have caught him."
"That I promise readily. What more?"
"Secondly, the place of your chief wife today, and a week hence, when I shall have made you king, the name and state of Queen of the People of Fire, with all that hangs thereto."
"You are ambitious, woman, and know well how to drive a bargain. Well, if you can ask, I can give. For I have ever loved you, and your mind is great as your body is beautiful. If through your help I should become king of the People of Fire, you shall be their queen. I swear it by the spirits of my fathers and by my own head. And now, your tidings."
"These are they, Hafela. Hosa has turned Christian, and betrayed the plot to Nodwengo, and the great gorge yonder, but 3 hours' march away, is ambushed. Tomorrow you and your people would have been cut off there, had I not run so fast and far to warn you. After which the impis of Nodwengo were commanded to follow your women and cattle over the mountain pass and capture them."
"This is news indeed," said the prince. "Say now, how many regiments are hidden in the gorge?"
8.
"Well, I have 14. So, being warned, there is little to fear. I will catch these rats in their own hole."
"I have a better plan," said Noma. "It is this.
leave 6 regiments posted upon the brow of yonder hill, and let them stay there. Then, when the generals of Nodwengo see that they do not enter the gorge, they will believe that the ambush is discovered, and after waiting 1 day, or perhaps 2, will move out to give battle, thinking that before them is all your strength. But command your regiments to run and not to fight, drawing the army of Nodwengo after them. Meanwhile, yes, this very night, you yourself, with all the men that are left to you, must march upon the great place, which, though it be strong, can be stormed, for it is defended by less than 5,000 soldiers. There, having taken it, you shall slay Nodwengo, proclaiming yourself king, and afterwards, by the help of the impi that you leave here, which will march onward to your succour, you can deal with yonder army."
"A great scheme truly," said Hafela in admiration. "But how do I know whether all this tale is true, or whether you do but set a snare for me?"
"Bid scouts go out and creep into yonder gully," answered Noma, "and you will see whether or no I have spoken falsely. For the rest, I am in your hands, and if I lie, you can take my life in payment."
"If I march upon the great place, it must be at midnight when none can see me go," said Hafela. "And what will you do then, Noma, who are too weary to travel again so soon?"
"I will be borne in a litter till my strength comes back to me," she answered. "And now give me to eat, and let me rest while I may." 5 hours later, Hafela, with the most of his army, a force of something over 20,000 men, was journeying swiftly, but by a circuitous route, towards the great place of the king. On the crest of the hill facing the gorge, as Noma had suggested, he left 6 regiments, with instructions to fly before Nodwengo's generals, and when they had led them far enough, to follow him as swiftly as they were able. These orders, or rather the first part of them, they carried out. For, as it chanced after 2 days' flight, the king's soldiers got behind them by a night march, and falling on them at dawn, killed half of them and dispersed the rest. Then it was that Nodwengo's generals learned for the first time that they were following one wing of Hafela's army only, while the main body was striking at the heart of the kingdom, and turned their faces homeward in fear and haste. On the morning after the flight of Noma, Owen passed into the last stage of his sickness, and it became evident both to himself and to those who watched him that at the most he could not live for more than a few days. For his part, he accepted his doom joyfully, spending the time which was left to him in writing letters that were to be forwarded to England whenever an opportunity should arise. Also, he set down on paper a statement of the principal events of his strange mission, and other information for the guidance of his white successors, who by now should be drawing near to the land of the Amasuka. In the intervals of these last labours, from time to time he summoned the king and the wisest and trustiest of them whom he had baptized to his bedside, teaching them what they should do when he was gone, and exhorting them to cling to the faith. On the afternoon of the 4th day from that of the baptism of Hosa, he fell into a quiet sleep, from which he did not wake until sundown. "Am I still here?" he asked, wondering, of John and Hosa, who watched at his bedside. "From my dreams I thought that it was otherwise. John, send a messenger to the king, and ask of him to assemble the people, all who care to come, in the open place before my house. I am about to die, and first I would speak with them." John went weeping upon his errand, leaving Owen and Hosa alone. "Tell me now what I should do," said Hosa in a voice of despair, "seeing that it is I and no other who have brought this death upon you." "Fret not, my brother," answered Owen, "for this and other things you did in the days of your blindness, and it was permitted that you should do them to an end. Kneel down now, that I may absolve you from your sins before I pass away. For I tell you, Hosa, I believe that ere many days are over, you must walk on the same path which I travel tonight." "Is it so?" Hosa answered. "Well, I am glad, for I have no longer any lust of life." Then he knelt down and received the absolution. Now John returned, and Nodwengo with him, who told him that the people were gathering in hundreds according to his wish. "Then clothe me in my robes, and let us go forth," he said, "for I would speak my last words in the ears of men." So they put the surplice and hood upon his wasted form and went out, John preceding him, holding on high the ivory crucifix, while the king and Hosa supported him, one on either side. Without his gate stood a low wooden platform, whence at times Owen had been accustomed to address any congregation larger than the church would contain. On this platform he took his seat. The moon was bright above him, and by it he could see that already his audience numbered some thousands of men, women, and children. The news had spread that the wonderful white man, messenger, wished to take his farewell of the nation, though even now many did not understand that he was dying, but imagined that he was about to leave the country, or, for aught they knew, to vanish from their sight into heaven. For a moment Owen looked at the sea of dusky faces. Then, in the midst of an intense stillness, he spoke in a voice low indeed, but clear and steady. "My children," he said, "hear my last words to you. More than 3 years ago, in a far, far land, and upon such a night as this, a voice spoke to me from above, commanding me to seek you out, to turn you from your idolatry, and to lighten your darkness. I listened to the voice, and hither I journeyed across sea and land, though how this thing might be done I could not guess. But to him who sent me all things are possible. And while yet I lingered upon the threshold of your country, in a dream were revealed to me events that were to come. So I appeared before you boldly, and knowing that he had been poisoned and that I could cure him, I drew back your king from the mouth of death. And you said to yourselves, 'Behold, a wizard indeed, let us hear him.' Then I gave battle to your sorcerers yonder upon the plain, and from the foot of the cross I teach, the lightnings were rolled back upon them, and they were not. Look now, their chief stands at my side, among my disciples one of the foremost and most faithful. Afterwards troubles arose. Your king died a Christian, and many of the people fell away, but still a remnant remained. And he who became king was converted to the truth. Now I have sown the seed, and the corn is ripe before my eyes, but it is not permitted that I should reap the harvest. My work is ended, my task is done, and I, the messenger, return to make report to him who sent the message. Hear me yet a little while, for soon shall my voice be silent. I come not to bring peace but a sword, so said the Master whom I preach, and so say I, the most unworthy of his servants. Salvation cannot be bought at a little price. It must be paid for by the blood and griefs of men, and in blood and griefs you must pay, O my children. Through much tribulation must you also enter the kingdom of God. Even now the heathen is at your gates, and many of you shall perish on his spears. But I tell you that he shall not conquer. Be faithful, cling to the cross, and do not dare to doubt your Lord, for he will be your captain, and you shall be his people. Cleave to your king, for he is good, and in the day of trial listen to the counsel of this Hosa, who once was the first of evildoers. For with him goes my spirit, and he is my son in the spirit. My children, fare you well. Forget me not, for I have loved you. Or, if you will, forget me, but remember my teaching, and hearken to those who shall tread upon the path I made. The peace of God be with you, the blessing of God be upon you, and the salvation of God await you, as it awaits me tonight. Friends, lead me hence to die." They turned to him, but before their hands touched him, Thomas Owen fell forward upon the breast of Hosa and lay there a while. Then suddenly, for the last time, he lifted himself and cried out, "I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, and not to me only, but to all those who love his appearing." Then his head fell back, his dark eyes closed, and the messenger was dead. Hosa, the man who had murdered him, having lifted him up to show him to the people, amidst a sound of mighty weeping, took the body in his arms and bore it thence to make it ready for burial. End of chapter 18. Of The Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Fall of the Great Place. On the morrow at sundown, all that remained of Thomas Owen was laid to rest before the altar of the little church, Nodwengo the king and Hosa lowering him into the grave,
while John, his first disciple, read over him the burial service of the Christians, which it had been one of the dead man's last labours to translate into the language of the Amasuka. Before the ceremony was finished, a soldier, carrying a spear in his hand, pushed his way through the dense and weeping crowd, and having saluted, whispered something into the ear of the king. Nodwengo started, and with a last look of farewell at the face of his friend, left the chapel, accompanied by some of his generals who were present, muttering to Hokosa that he was to follow when all was done. Accordingly, some few minutes later, he went and was admitted into the council hut, where captains and messengers were to be seen arriving and departing continuously. "Hokosa," said the king, "you have dealt treacherously with me in the past, but I believe now that your heart is true. At the least, I follow the commands of our dead master, and trust you. Listen. The outposts have sighted an impi of many regiments advancing towards the great place, though whether or no it be my own impi returning victorious from the war with my brother, I cannot say. There is this against it, however, that a messenger has but just arrived reporting that the generals have perceived the host of Hafela encamped upon a ridge over against the gorge where they awaited him. If that be so, they can scarcely have given him battle, for the messenger is swift of foot and has travelled night and day. Yet how can this be the impi of Hafela, who, say the generals, is encamped upon the ridge?" "He may have left the ridge, King, having been warned of the ambush." "It cannot be, for when the runner started, his fires burned there, and his soldiers were gathered round them." "Then perhaps his captains sit upon the ridge with some portion of his strength to deceive those who await him in the gorge, while, knowing that here men are few, he himself swoops down on you with the main body of his impi." "At least we shall learn presently," answered the king. "But if it be as I fear, and we are outwitted, what is there that we can do against so many?" Now one of the captains proposed that they should stay where they were and hold the place. "It is too large," answered the king. "They will burst the fences and break our line." Another suggested that they should fly, and, avoiding the regiments of Hafela in the darkness of the night, should travel swiftly in search of the main army that had been sent to lie in ambush. "What?" said Nodwengo. "Leaving the aged and the women and children to perish? For how can we take such a multitude? No, I will have none of this plan." Then Hokosa spoke. "King," he said, "listen to my counsel. Command now that all the women and the old men, taking with them such cattle and food as are in the town, depart at once into the Valley of Death, and collect in the open space that lies beyond the Tree of Doom, near the spring of water that is there. The valley is narrow and the cliffs are steep, and it may chance that by the help of Heaven we shall be able to hold it till the army returns to relieve us, to seek which messengers must be sent at once with these tidings." "The plan is good," said the king, though none had thought of it, "but so we shall lose the town." "Towns can be rebuilt," answered Hokosa, "but who may restore the lives of men?" As the words left his lips, a runner burst into the council, crying: "King, the impi is that of Hafela, and the prince heads it in person. Already his outposts rest upon the plain of fire." Then Nodwengo rose and issued his orders, commanding that all the ineffective population of the town, together with such food and cattle as could be gathered, should retreat at once into the Valley of Death. By this time the 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers who were left in the great place had been paraded on the open ground in front of the king's house, where they stood, still and silent in the moonlight. Nodwengo and the captains went out to them, and as they saw him come they lifted their spears like one man, giving him the royal salute of "King." He held up his hand and addressed them. "Soldiers," he said, "we have been outwitted. My impi is afar, and that of Hafela is at our gates. Yonder in the valley, though we be few, we can defend ourselves till succour reaches us, which already messengers have gone out to seek. But first we must give time for the women and children, the sick and the aged, to withdraw with food and cattle, and this we can do in one way only, by keeping Hafela at bay till they have passed the archway, all of them. Now, soldiers, for the sake of your own lives, of your honour and of those you love, swear to me in the holy name which we have been taught to worship, that you will fight out this great fight without fear or faltering." "We swear it in the holy name, and by your head, King," roared the regiments. "Then victory is already ours," answered Nodwengo. "Follow me, children of fire!" And shaking his great spear, he led the way towards that portion of the outer fence upon which Hafela was advancing. By now the town behind them was a scene of almost indescribable tumult and confusion, for the companies detailed to the task were clearing the numberless huts of their occupants, and collecting women, children, and oxen in thousands, preparatory to driving them into the defile. Panic had seized many of these poor creatures, who, in imagination, already saw themselves impaled upon the cruel spears of Hafela's troops, and indeed, in not a few instances, believed those who were urging them forward to be the enemy. Women shrieked and wrung their hands, children wailed piteously, oxen lowed, and the infirm and aged vented their grief in groans and cries to heaven or their ancient god for mercy. In truth, so difficult was the task of marshalling this motley array at night, numbering as it did 10,000 or 12,000 souls, that a full hour went by before the mob even began to move, slowly and uncertainly, towards the place of refuge, whereof the opening was so narrow that but a few of them could pass it at a time. Meanwhile Hafela was developing the attack. Forming his great army into the shape of a wedge, he raised his battle cry and rushed down on the first line of fortifications, which he stormed without difficulty, for they were defended by a few skirmishers only. Next he attacked the second line, and carried it after heavy fighting, then hurled himself upon the weakest point of the main fence of the vast kraal. Here it was that the fray began in earnest, for here Nodwengo was waiting for him. Thrice the thousands rolled on in the face of a storm of spears, and thrice they fell back from the wide fence of thorns and the wall of stone behind it. By now the battle had raged for about an hour and a half, and it was reported to the king that the first of the women and children had passed the archway into the valley, and that nearly all of them were clear of the eastern gate of the town. "Then it is time that we follow them," said the king, "for if we wait here until the warriors of Hafela are among us, our retreat will become a rout, and soon there will be none left to follow. Let one company," and he named it, "hold the fence for a while, to give us time to withdraw, taking the wounded with us." "We hear you, King," said one of that company, "but our captain is killed." "Who among you will take over the command of these men and hold the breach?" asked Nodwengo of the group of officers about him. "I, King," answered old Hokosa, lifting his spear, "for I care not whether I live or die." "Go to, boaster," cried another. "Who among us cares whether he lives or dies when the king commands?" "That we shall know to-morrow," said Hokosa quietly, and the soldiers laughed at the retort. "So be it," said the king, and while silently and swiftly he led off the regiments, keeping in the shadow of the huts, Hokosa and his 100 men posted themselves behind the weakened fence and wall. Now for the fourth time the attacking regiment came forward grimly, on this occasion led by the prince himself. As they drew near, Hokosa leapt upon the wall, and standing there in the bright moonlight where all could see him, he called to them to halt. Instinctively they obeyed him. "Is it Hafela whom I see yonder?" he asked.
"Ah, it is I," answered the prince. "What would you with me, wizard and traitor?"
"This only, Hafela. I would ask you what you seek here."
"That which you promised me, Hokosa, the crown of my father and certain other things."
"Then get you back, Hafela, for you shall never win them. Have I prophesied falsely to you at any time? Not so. Neither do I prophesy falsely now. Get you back whence you came, and your wolves with you, else shall you bide here forever."
"Do you dare to call down evil on me, wizard?" shouted the prince furiously. "Your wife is mine, and now I take your life also." And with all his strength he hurled at him the great spear he held. It hissed past Hokosa's head, touching his ear, but he never flinched from the steel. "A poor cast, Prince," he said, laughing, "but so it must have been. For I am guarded by that which you cannot see. My wife you have, and she shall be your ruin. My life you may take, but ere it leaves me, Hafela, I shall see you dead and your army scattered. The messenger is passed away, but his power has fallen upon me, and I speak the truth to you, O Prince and warriors, who are already dead." Now a shriek of dismay and fury rose from the hundreds who heard this prophecy of ill, for of Hokosa and his magic they were terribly afraid. "Kill him! Kill the wizard!" they shouted, and a rain of spears rushed towards him on the wall. They rushed towards him, they passed above, below, around, but of them all not one touched him. "Did I not tell you that I was guarded by that which you cannot see?" Hokosa asked contemptuously. Then slowly he descended from the wall amidst a great silence. "When men are scarce, the tongue must play a part," he explained to his companions, who stared at him wondering. "By now the king and those with him should have reached the eastern gate, whereas had we fought at once, a fellow would be hard upon his heels, for we are few, and who can hold a buffalo with a rope of grass? Yet I think that I spoke the truth when I told him that the garment of the messenger has fallen upon my shoulders, and that death awaits him and his companions, as it awaits me also, and many of us. Now, friends, be ready, for the bull charges, and soon we must feel his horns. This at least is left to you, to die gloriously." While he was still speaking, the first files of the regiment rushed upon the fence, tearing aside the thorns with their hands till a passage was made through them. Then they sprang upon the wall, there to be met by the spears of Hokosa and his men thrusting upward from beneath its shelter. Time after time they sprang, and time after time they fell back dead or wounded, till at last, dashing forward in one dense column, they poured over the stones as the rising tide pours over the rocks on the seashore, driving the defenders before them by the sheer weight of numbers. "This game is played," cried Hokosa. "Fly now to the eastern gate, for here we can do nothing more." So they fled, those who survived of them, and after them came the thousands of the foe, sacking and firing the deserted town as they advanced. Hokosa and his men, or rather the half of them, reached the gate and passed it in safety, barring it after them, and thereby delaying the attackers till they could burst their way through. Now hundreds of huts were afire, and the flames spread swiftly, lighting up the country far and wide. In the glare of them, Hokosa could see that already a full 2/3 of the crowd of fugitives had passed the narrow arch, while Nodwengo and the soldiers were drawn up in companies upon the steep and rocky slope that led to it, protecting their retreat. He advanced to the king and reported himself. "So you have lived through it," said Nodwengo. "I shall die when my hour comes, and not before," Hokosa answered. "We did well yonder, and yet the most of us are alive to tell the tale, for I knew when and how to go. Be ready, King, for the foe press us close, and that mob behind us crawls onward like a snail." As he spoke, the pursuers broke through the fence and gate of the burning town, and once more the fight began. They had the advantage of numbers, but Nodwengo and his troops stood in a wide road upon higher ground, protected on either side by walls, and were moreover rested, not breathless and weary with travel like the men of Hafela. Slowly, fighting every inch of the way, Nodwengo was pushed back, and slowly the long ant-like line of women and sick and cattle crept through the opening in the rock, till at length all of them were gone. "It is time," said Nodwengo, glancing behind him, "for our arms grow weary." Then he gave orders, and company by company the defending force followed on the path of the fugitives, till at length, amidst a roar of rage and disappointment, the last of them vanished through the arch, Hokosa among them, and the place was blocked with stones, above which shone a hedge of spears. End of chapter 19. Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Noma sets a snare. Thus ended the first night's battle, since for this time the enemy had fought enough. Nodwengo and his men had also had enough, for out of the 5,000 of them, some 1,100 were killed or wounded. Yet they might not rest, for all that night, assisted by the women, they laboured,
building stone walls across the narrowest parts of the valley. Also the cattle, women, and children were moved along the gorge, which in shape may be compared to a bottle with two necks, one at either end, and encamped in the opening of the second neck, where was the spring of water. This spot was chosen both because here alone water could be obtained, without which they could not hold out much more than a single day, and because the koppie, whereon grew the strange-looking euphorbia known as the Tree of Doom, afforded a natural rampart against attack. Shortly after dawn, while the soldiers were resting and eating of such food as could be procured, for the most part strips of raw or half-cooked meat cut from hastily killed cattle, the onslaught was renewed with vigour, Hafela directing his efforts to the forcing of the natural archway. But strive as he would, this he could not do, for it was choked with stones and thorns and guarded by brave men. "You do but waste your labour, Hafela," said Noma, who stood by him watching the assault.
"What then is to be done?" he asked. "For unless we come at them, we cannot kill them. It was clever of them to take refuge in this hole. I thought surely that they would fight it out yonder, beneath the fences of the great place."
"Ah," she answered, "you forgot that they had Hosa on their side. Did you then think to catch him sleeping? This retreat was Hokosa's counsel. I learned it from the lips of that wounded captain before they killed him. Now it seems that there are but two paths to follow, and you can choose between them. The one is to send a regiment a day and a half's journey across the cliff top to guard the further mouth of the valley, and to wait till these jackals starve in their hole, for certainly they can never come out."
"It has started 6 hours since," said Hafela, "and though the precipices are steep, having the moon to travel by, it should reach the river mouth of the valley before dawn tomorrow, cutting Nodwengo off from the plains, if indeed he should dare to venture out upon them, which with so small a force he will not do. Yet this first plan of yours must fail, Noma, seeing that before they starve within, the generals of Nodwengo will be back upon us from the mountains, catching us between the hammer and the anvil, and I know not how that fight would go."
"Yet sooner or late it must be fought."
"Nay," he answered, "for my hope is that should the Impi return to find Nodwengo dead, they will surrender and acknowledge me as king who am the first of the blood royal. But what is your second plan?"
By way of answer, she pointed to the cliff above them. On the right-hand side, facing the archway, was a flat ledge overhanging the valley at a height of about 100 feet. "If you can come yonder," she said, "it will be easy to storm this gate, for there lie rocks in plenty, and men cannot fight when stones are dropping on their heads."
"But how can we come to that home of vultures, where never man has set a foot? Look, the cliff above is sheer; no rock rabbit could stand upon it."
With her eye Noma measured the distance from the brink of the precipice to the broad ledge commanding the valley. 60 paces, not more," she said. "Well, yonder are oxen in plenty, and out of their hides ropes can be made, and out of ropes a ladder, down which men may pass. 10 or even 5 would be enough."
"Well thought of, Noma," said Hafela. "Hokosa told us last night that to him had passed the wisdom of the messenger. But if this be so, I think that to you has passed the guile of Hokosa."
"It seems to me that some of it abides with him," answered Noma, laughing. Then the prince gave orders, and with many workers of hides toiling at it, within 2 hours the ladder was ready, its staves, set 20 inches apart, being formed of knob carries, or the broken shafts of stabbing spears. Now they lowered it from the top of the precipice, so that its end rested upon the ledge, and down it came several men, who swung upon its giddy length like spiders on a web. Reaching this great shelf in safety, and advancing to the edge of it, these men started a boulder, which, although as it chanced it hurt no one, fell in the midst of a group of the defenders and bounded away through them. "Now we must be going," said Hokosa, looking up, "for no man can fight against rocks, and our spears cannot reach those birds. Had the army been taught the use of the bow, as I counselled in the past days, we might still have held the archway, but they called it a woman's weapon and would have none of it. As he spoke, another stone fell, crushing the life out of a man who stood next to him. Then they retreated to the first wall, which had been piled up during the night, where it was not possible to roll rocks upon them from the cliffs above. This wall, and others reared at intervals behind it, they set to work to strengthen as much as they could, making the most of the time that was left to them before the enemy could clear the way and march on to attack. Presently Hafela's men were through and sweeping down upon them with a roar, thinking to carry the wall at a single rush. But in this they failed. Indeed, it was only after an hour's hard fighting, and by the expedient of continually attacking the work with fresh companies, that at length they stormed the wall. When Hokosa saw that he could no longer hold the place, but before the foe was upon him, he drew off his soldiers to the second wall, a quarter of a mile or more away, and here the fight began again. And so it went on for hour after hour, as one by one the fortifications were carried by the weight of numbers. For the attackers fought desperately under the eye of their prince, caring nothing for the terrible loss they suffered in men. Twice the force of the defenders was changed by order of Nodwengo, fresh men being sent from the companies held in reserve to take the places of those who had borne the brunt of the battle. This indeed it was necessary to do, seeing that it was impossible to carry water to so many, and in that burning valley men could not fight for long athirst. Only Hokosa stayed on, for they brought him drink in a gourd, and wherever the fray was fiercest, there he was always. Nor, although spears were rained upon him by hundreds, was he touched by one of them. At length, as the night fell, the king's men were driven back from their last skirm in the western half of the valley, across the open space, back upon the koppie where stood the Tree of Doom. Here they stayed a while, till, overmatched and outworn, they were pushed from its rocks across the narrow stretch of broken ground into the shelter of the great stone skirm or wall that ran from side to side of the further neck of the valley, whereon thousands of women, and such men as could be spared, had been working incessantly during the past night and day. It was as he retreated among the last upon this wall that Hokosa caught sight of Noma for the first time since they parted in the house of the messenger. In the forefront of his troops, directing the attack, was Hafela the prince, and at his side stood Noma, carrying in her hand a little shield and a spear. At this moment also she saw him, and called aloud to him: "You have fought well, wizard, but tomorrow all your magic shall avail you nothing, for it will be your last day upon this earth." "Ay, Noma," he answered, "and yours also." Then, of a sudden, a company of the king's men rushed from the shelter of the wall upon the attackers, driving them back to the koppie and killing several, so that in the confusion and gathering darkness Hokosa lost sight of her, though a man at his side declared that he saw her fall beneath the thrust of an assegai. Thus ended the second day. Now when the watch had been set, the king and his captains took counsel together, for their hearts were heavy. "Listen," said Nodwengo. "Out of 5,000 soldiers, 1,000 have been killed, and 1,000 lie among us wounded. Hark to the groaning of them. Also we have with us women and children and sick to the number of 12,000. And between us and those who would butcher them every one, there stands but a single wall. Nor is this the worst of it. The spring cannot supply the wants of so great a multitude in this hot place, and it is feared that presently the water will be done. What way shall we turn? If we surrender to Hafela, perhaps he will spare the lives of the women and children. But whatever he may promise, the most of us he will surely slay. If we fight and are defeated, then once his regiments are among us, all will be slain according to the ancient custom of our people. I have bethought me that we might retreat through the valley, but the river beyond is in flood. Also, it is certain that before this multitude could reach it, the prince will have sent a force to cut us off while he himself harasses our rear. Now let him who has counsel speak." "King, I have counsel," said Hokosa. "What were the words that the messenger spoke to us before he died? Did he not say, 'Even now the heathen is at your gates, and many of you shall perish on his spears, but I tell you that he shall not conquer'? Did he not say, 'Be faithful, cling to the cross, and do not dare to doubt your Lord, for he will protect you and your children after you, and he will be your captain, and you shall be his people'?
Did he not bid you also to listen to my counsel? Then listen to it, for it is this: your case seems desperate, but have no fear and take no thought for the morrow, for all shall yet be well. Let us now pray to him that the messenger has revealed to us, and whom now he implores on our behalf in that place where he is to guide us and to save us, for then surely he will hearken to our prayer." "So be it," said Nodwengo, and going out he stood upon a pillar of stone in the moonlight, and offered up his supplication in the hearing of the multitude. Meanwhile those of the camp of Hafela were also taking counsel. They had fought bravely indeed, and carried the scances, but at great cost, since for every man that Nodwengo had lost, 3 of theirs had fallen. Moreover, they were in evil case with weariness and the want of water, as each drop they drank must be carried to them from the great place in bags made of rawhide, which caused it to stink, for they had but few gourds with them.
"Now it is strange," said Hafela, "that these men should fight so bravely, seeing that they are but a handful. There can be scarce 3,000 of them left, and yet I doubt not that before we carry those last walls of theirs, as many of us or more will be done. Aye, and after they are done with, we must meet their great impi when it returns, and of what will befall us then I scarcely like to think."
"Ill fortune will befall you while Hokosa lives," broke in Noma. "Had it not been for him, this trouble would have been done with by now. But he is a wizard, and by his wizardries he defeats us, and puts heart into Nodwengo and the warriors. You yourself have seen him this day defying us, not once but many times, for upon his flesh steel has no power. Ay, and this is but the beginning of evil, for I am sure that he leads you into some deep trap where you shall perish everlastingly. Did he not himself declare that the power of that dead white worker of miracles has fallen upon him, and who can fight against magic?"
"Who indeed?" said Hafela humbly,
for like all savages he was very superstitious, and moreover a sincere believer in Hokosa's supernatural capacities.
"This wizard is too strong for us. He is invulnerable, and as I know well, he can read the secret thoughts of men, and can suck wisdom from the dead, while to his eyes the darkness is no blind."
"Nay, Hafela," answered Noma, "there is one crack in his shield. Hear me. If we can but catch him and hold him fast, we shall have no need to fear him more, and I think that I know how to bait the trap."
"How will you bait it?" asked Hafela.
"Thus. Midway between the koppie and the wall behind which lie the men of the king stands a flat rock, and all about that rock are stretched the bodies of dead soldiers. Now this is my plan: that when next one of those dark storm clouds passes over the face of the moon, 6 of our strongest warriors should creep upon their bellies down this way and that, as though they were also numbered with the slain. This done, you shall dispatch a herald to call in the ears of the king that you desire to treat with him of peace. Then he will answer that if this be so, you can come beneath the walls of his camp, and your herald shall refuse, saying that you fear treachery. But he must add that if Nodwengo will bid Hokosa to advance alone to the flat rock, you will bid me, Noma, whom none can fear, to do likewise, and that there we can talk in sight of both armies, and returning thence make report to you and to Nodwengo. Afterwards, so soon as Hokosa has set his foot upon the rock, those men who seem to be dead shall spring upon him and drag him to our camp, where we can deal with him, for once the wizard is taken, the cause of Nodwengo is lost."
"A good pitfall," said the prince, "but will Hokosa walk into the trap?"
"I think so, Hafela, for 3 reasons. He is altogether without fear. He will desire, if may be, to make peace on behalf of the king, and he has this strange weakness, that he still loves me, and will scarcely suffer an occasion of speaking with me to go past, although he has divorced me."
"So be it," said the prince. "The game can be tried, and if it fails, why we lose nothing, whereas if it succeeds, we gain Hokosa, which is much. For with you I think that our arms will never prosper, while that accursed wizard sits yonder weaving his spells against us, and bringing our men to death by hundreds and by thousands."
Then he gave his orders, and presently, when a cloud passed over the face of the moon, 6 chosen men crept forward under the lee of the flat rock, and threw themselves down here and there amongst the dead. Soon the cloud passed, and the herald advanced across the open space blowing a horn, and waving a branch in his hand to show that he came upon a mission of peace. End of chapter 20. One of the Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Hosa is lifted up.
"What would you?"
asked Hosa of the herald as he halted a short spear cast from the wall.
"My master, the Prince Hafela, desires to treat with your master, Nodwengo. Many men have fallen on either side, and if this war goes on, though victory must be his at last, many more will fall. Therefore, if any plan can be found, he desires to spare their lives."
Now Hosa spoke with the king and answered:
"Then let Hafela come beneath the wall, and we will talk with him." "Not so," answered the herald. "Does a buck walk into an open pit? Were the prince to come here, it might chance that your spears would talk with him. Let Nodwengo follow me to the camp yonder, where we promise him safe conduct." "Not so," answered Hosa. "Does a buck walk into an open pit? Set out your message, and we will consider it." "Nay, I am but a common man, without authority, but I am charged to make you another offer, and if you will not hear it, then there is an end. Let Hosa advance alone to that flat rock you see yonder, and there he shall be met also alone by one having power to talk with him, namely by the Lady Noma, who was once his wife. Thus they can confer together midway between the camps and in full sight of both of them, nor, no man being near, can he find cause to be afraid of an unarmed girl. What say you?" Hosa turned and talked with the king. "I think it well that you should not go," said Nodwengo. "The offer seems fair, and the stone is out of reach of their spears. Still, behind it may lurk a scheme to kill or capture you, for Hafela is very cunning." "It may be so, King," answered Hosa. "Still, my heart tells me it is wisest that I should do this thing, for our case is desperate, and if I do it not, that may be the cause of the death of all of us tomorrow. At the worst, I am but one man, and it matters little what may chance to me. Nor shall I come to any harm unless it is the will of Heaven that it should be so. And be sure of this, that out of the harm will arise good, for where I go, there the spirit of the messenger goes with me. Remember that he bade you listen to my counsel while I remain with you, seeing that I do not speak of my own wisdom. Therefore let me go, and if it should chance that I am taken, trouble not about the matter, for thus it will be fated to some great end. Above all, though often enough I have been a traitor in the past, do not dream that I betray you, keeping in mind that to do so would be to betray my own soul, which very soon must render its account on high." "As you will, Hosa," answered the king. "And now tell those rebel dogs that on these terms only will I make peace with them: that they withdraw across the mountains by the path which their women and children have taken, leaving this land forever without lifting another spear against us. If they will do this, notwithstanding all the wickedness and slaughter that they have worked, I will send command to my impi to let them go unharmed. If they will not do this, I put my trust in the God I worship, and will fight this fray out to the end, knowing that if I and my people perish, they shall perish also." Now Nodwengo himself spoke to the herald who was waiting beyond the wall. "Go back to him you serve," he said, "and say that Hosa will meet her who was his wife upon the flat stone, and talk with her in the sight of both armies, bearing my word with him. At the sound of the blowing of a horn shall each of them advance unarmed and alone from either camp. Say to my brother also
that it will indeed be ill for him if he attempts treachery upon Hokosa. For the man who causes his blood to flow will surely die, and after death shall be accursed for ever." The herald went, and presently a horn was blown. "Now it comes into my mind that we part for the last time," said Nodwengo in a troubled voice as he took the hand of Hokosa. "It may be so, King. In my heart I think that it is so. Yet I do not altogether grieve thereat, for the burden of my past sins crushes me, and I am weary and seek for rest. Yet we do not part for the last time, because whatever chances, in the end I shall make my report to you yonder," and he pointed upwards. "Reign on for long years, King. Reign well and wisely, clinging to the faith, for thus at the last shall you reap your reward. Farewell." Now again the horn blew, and in the bright moonlight the slight figure of Noma could be seen advancing towards the stone. Then Hokosa sprang from the wall and advanced also, till at the same moment they climbed upon the stone. "Greeting, Hokosa," said Noma, and she stretched out her hand to him. By way of answer he placed his own behind his back, saying, "To your business, woman." Yet his eyes searched her face, the face which in his folly he still loved. And thus it came about that he never saw sundry of the dead bodies which lay in the shadow of the stone begin to quicken into life, and inch by inch to arise, first to their knees and next to their feet. He never saw or heard them, yet as the words left his lips they sprang upon him from every side, holding him so that he could not move. "Away with him!" cried Noma with a laugh of triumph, and at her command he was half dragged and half carried across the open space and thrust violently over a stone wall into the camp of Hafela. Now Nodwengo and his soldiers saw what had happened, and with a shout of "Treachery!" some hundreds of them leaped into the plain and began to run towards the koppie to rescue their envoy. Hokosa heard the shout, and wrenching himself round beheld them. "Back!" he cried in a clear shrill voice. "Back, children of Nodwengo, and leave me to my fate, for the foe waits for you by thousands behind the wall." A soldier struck him across the mouth, bidding him be silent, but his warning had come to the ears of Nodwengo, causing him and his warriors to halt and begin a retreat. It was well that they did so, for seeing that they would not come on, from under the shelter of the wall and of every rock and stone, soldiers jumped up by companies and charged, driving them back to their own schanse. But the king's men had the start of them, and had taken shelter behind it, whence they greeted them with a volley of spears, killing 10 and wounding twice as many more. Now it was Hokosa's turn to laugh, and laugh he did, saying, "My taking is well paid for already, Prince. A score of your best warriors is a heavy price to give for the carcass of one weary and aging man. But since I am here among you, captured with so much pain and loss, tell me of your courtesy why I have been brought." Then the prince shook his spear at him and cursed him. "Would you learn, wizard and traitor?" he cried. "We have caught you because we know well that while you stay yonder, your magic counsel will prevail against our might. Whereas, when once we hold you fast, Nodwengo will wander to his ruin like a blind and moonstruck man, for you were to him both eyes and brain." "I understand," said Hokosa calmly. "But, Prince, how if I left my wisdom behind me?" "That may not be," answered Hafela, "since even a wizard cannot throw his thoughts into the heart of another from afar." "Ah, you think so, Prince. Well, ask Noma yonder if I cannot throw my thoughts into her heart from afar, though of late I have not chosen to do so, having put aside such spells. But let it pass, and tell me, having taken me, what is it you propose to do with me? First, however, I will give you for nothing some of that wisdom which you grudge to Nodwengo the king. Be advised by me, Prince, and take the terms that he offers to you, namely, to turn this very night and be gone from the land without harm or hindrance. Will you receive my gift, Hafela?" "What will happen if I refuse it?" asked the prince slowly. Now Hokosa looked at the dust at his feet. Then he gazed upwards, searching the heavens, and answered, "Did I not tell you yesterday?
I think that this will happen. I think, but who can be quite sure of the future, Hafela, that you and the most of your army by this hour tomorrow night will be lying fast asleep about this place, with jackals for your bedfellows." The prince heard and trembled at his words, for he believed that if he willed it, Hokosa could prophesy the truth. "Accursed dog," he said, "I am minded to be guided by your saying. But be sure of this, that if I follow it, you shall stay here to sleep with jackals, yes, this very night."
Then Noma broke in. "Be not mad, Hafela," she said. "Will you listen to the lies that this renegade tells to work upon your fears? Will you abandon victory when it lies within your grasp, and in place of a great king become a fugitive whom all men mock at, an outcast, to be hunted down at leisure by that brother against whom you dared to rebel, but on whom you did not dare to shut your hand when he lay in its hollow? Silence the tongue of this captive rogue forever, and become a man again, with the heart of a man."
"Now," said Hokosa gently, "many would find it hard to believe that I reared this woman from childhood, nursing her with my own hands when she was sick, and giving her of the best I had. That afterwards, when you stole her from me, Prince, I sinned deeply to win her back. That I married her and sinned yet more deeply to give her the greatness she desired, and at last of my own will I loosed the bonds by which I held her, although I could not thrust her memory from my heart. Yet I have earned it all, for I made her the tool of my witchcraft, and therefore it is just that she should turn and rend me. Well, if you like it, take her counsel, Prince, and let mine go, for I care nothing which you take. Only forgive me if I prophesy once more, and for the last time. I am sure that Nodwengo yonder spoke truth when he bade your herald tell me that he who causes my blood to flow shall surely die, and for it be called to a strict account. Prince, I am a Christian now, and believe me, whatever you may do, I seek no revenge upon you, having been myself forgiven much. In my turn I have learned to forgive. Yet it may be ill for that man who causes my blood to flow." "Let him be strangled," said a captain who stood near by, "and then there will be no blood in the matter." "Friend," answered Hokosa, "you should have been not a soldier, but a pleader of causes. True it is then that the prince will only cause my life to fly, but whether that is a smaller sin I leave you to judge." "Keep him prisoner," said another, "till we learn how these matters end." "Nay," answered Hafela, "for then he will surely outwit us and escape. Noma, what shall we do with this man who was your husband? Tell us, for you should know best how to deal with him."
"Let me think," she answered, and she looked first at the ground beneath her, next around her, then upwards toward the skies. Now they stood at the foot of the koppie, on the flat top of which grew the great tree of doom, that for generations had served the people of fire as a place of execution of their criminals, or of those who fell under the ban of the king or of the witch doctors. Among and above the finger-like fronds of this strange and dreadful-looking tree towered that white dead limb shaped like a cross, which Owen had pointed out to his disciple John, taking it to be a sign and a promise. This cross stood out clear against the sinking moon. It caught Noma's eye, and a devilish thought entered into her heart. "You would keep this fellow alive," she said, "and yet you would not suffer him to escape. See, there above you is a cross such as he worships. Bind him to it, as he says the man whom he worships was bound, and let that dead man help him if he may." The prince and those about Noma shrank back a little in horror. They were cruel men, rendered more cruel by their superstitious fear of one whom they believed to be uncanny, one to whom they attributed inhuman powers which he was exercising to their destruction, but still this doom seemed dreadful to them. Noma read their minds and went on passionately: "You deem me unmerciful, but you do not know what I have suffered at this wizard's hands. For his sake, and because of him, I am haunted. For his purposes he opened the gates of distance. He sent me down among the dwellers in death, causing me to interpret their words for him. I did so, but the dwellers came back out of death with me, and from that hour they have not left me, nor will they ever leave me. For night by night they sojourn at my side, tormenting me with terrors. He has told me that through my mouth the spirit whom he drew into my body prophesied that he should be lifted up above the people. Let the prophecy be fulfilled. Let him be lifted up, for then perchance the ghost will depart from me, and I shall win peace and sleep. Also, thus alone can you hold him safe, and yet shed no blood."
"Be it so," said the prince. "When we plotted together of the death of the king, and as your price, Hokosa, you bargained for the girl whom I had chosen to wife, did I not warn you that this witch of many spells, who holds both our hearts in her little hands, should yet hound you to death, and mock you while you perished by an end of shame? What did I tell you, Hokosa?"
Now when he heard his fate, Hokosa bowed his head and trembled a little. Then he lifted it and exclaimed in a clear voice: "It is true, Prince, but I will add to your words. She shall bring both of us to death. For me, I am honoured indeed in that there has been allotted to me that same end which my master chose. To that cross let my sins be fastened, and with them my body." Now the moon sank, but in the darkness men were found who dared to climb the tree, taking with them strips of rawhide. They reached the top of it, 4 of them, and seating themselves upon the arms of the cross, they let down a rope, the noose of which was placed about the body of Hokosa. As it tightened upon him, he turned his calm and dreadful eyes onto the eyes of Noma, and said to her: "Woman, I do not reproach you, but I lay this fate upon you, that you shall watch me die. Thereafter let God deal with you as He may choose." Now when she heard these words, Noma shrieked aloud, for of a sudden she felt that the power of the will of Hokosa, from which she had been freed by him, had once more fallen upon her, and that come what might she was doomed to obey his last commands. Little by little the soldiers drew him up, and in the darkness they bound him fast there upon the lofty cross. Then they descended and left him, and would have led Noma with them from the tree, but this they could not do, for always she broke from them screaming and fled back to its shadow. Then, seeing that she was bewitched, Hafela commanded that they should bind a cloth about her mouth and leave her there till her senses returned to her in the sunlight, for none of them dared to stop with her in the shadow of that tree, since the odours of it were poisonous to man. Also, they believed the place to be haunted by evil spirits. End of chapter 21. Of the Wizard by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Victory of the Cross. The sun rose suddenly over the edge of the cliffs, and while it was yet deep shadow in the valley, its red light struck upon the white cross of perished wood that towered above the tree of doom, and on the black shape of Hokosa crucified to it living. The camp of the king saw and understood, and from every throat of the thousands of men, women, and children gathered there went up a roar of rage and horror. The king lifted his hand, and silence fell upon the place. Then he mounted on the wall and cried aloud: "Do you yet live, Hokosa, or is it your body only that those traitors have fastened to the tree?" Back came the answer through the clear, still air: "I live, O king." "Endure then for a little while," called Nodwengo, "and we will storm the tree and save you." "Nay," answered Hokosa, "you cannot save me. Yet before I die, I shall see you saved." Then his words were lost in tumult, for the 3rd day's fighting began. Desperately the regiments of Hafela, rushing across the open space, hurled themselves upon the fortifications, which during the night had been strengthened by the building of 2 inner walls. Nor was this all, for suddenly a cry told those in front that the regiment which Hafela had dispatched across the mountains had travelled up the eastern neck of the valley and were attacking the position in their rear. Well it was for Nodwengo now that he had listened to the counsel of Hokosa, and, wearied as his soldiers were, had commanded that here also a great wall should be built. For 2 hours the fight raged, and then on either side the foe fell back, not beaten indeed, though their dead were many, but to rest and take counsel. But now a new trouble arose, From all the camp of Nodwengo there went up a moan of pain to heaven, for since the evening of yesterday the spring had given out, and they had found no water wherewith to wet their lips. During the night they bore it, but now the sun, beating down on the black rocks with fearful force, scorched them to the marrow, till they began to wither like fallen leaves, and already wounded men and children died, while the warriors cut the throats of oxen and drank their blood. Hokosa, hanging on his cross, heard this moaning and divined its cause. "Be of good comfort, children of Nodwengo," he cried, "for I will pray that rain be sent upon you." And he lifted his head and prayed. Now whether it was by chance or whether his prayer was heard, who can say? At least it happened that immediately thereafter clouds began to gather and to thicken in the blue of heaven, and within 2 hours rain fell in torrents, so that everyone could drink his fill, and the spring, being replenished at its sources, flowed again strongly. After the rain came cold and moaning winds, and after the wind a great gloom and thunder. Now, taking advantage of the shadow, the regiments of Hafela renewed their attack, and this time they carried the first of the 3 walls, for its defenders grew feeble and few in number. There they paused a while, and save for the cries of the wounded and of the frightened women, the silence was great. "Let your hearts be filled up," cried the voice of Hokosa through the silence, "for the sunlight shines upon the plain of the great place yonder, and in it I see the sheen of spears. The impi travels to your aid, O children of Nodwengo." Now at this tidings the people of the king shouted for joy, but Hafela called to his regiments to make an end of them, and they hurled themselves upon the second wall, fighting desperately. Again and again they were beaten back, and again they came on, till at length they carried this wall also, driving its defenders, or those who remained alive of them, into the 3rd entrenchment, and paused to rest a while. "Pray for us, O Prophet, who are set on high," cried a voice from the camp, "for if succour do not reach us speedily, we are sped." Before the echoes of the voice had died away, a flash of lightning flared through the gloom, and in the light of it Hokosa saw that the king's impi was rushing up the gorge. "Fight on! Fight on!" he called in answer. "I have prayed to heaven, and your succour is at hand." Then, with a howl of rage, Hafela's regiments hurled themselves upon the 3rd and last entrenchment, attacking it at once in front and rear. Twice they nearly carried it, but each time the wild scream of Hokosa on high was heard above the din, conjuring its defenders to fight on and fear not, for heaven had sent them help. They fought as men have seldom fought before, and with them fought the women and even the children. They were few, and the foe was still many, but they listened to the urging of him whom they believed to be inspired in his death agony upon the cross above them, and still they held their own. Twice portions of the wall were torn down, but they filled the breach with the corpses of the dead, aye, and with the bodies of the living, for the wounded, the old men, and the very women piled themselves there in the place of stones. No such fray was told of in the annals of the People of Fire as this, the last stand of Nodwengo against the thousands of Hafela. Now all the shouting had died away, for men had no breath left wherewith to shout. Only from the gloomy place of battle came low groans and the deep sobbing sighs of warriors gripped in the death hug. "Fight on! Fight on!" shrilled the voice of Hokosa on high. "Lo, the skies are open to my dying sight, and I see the impis of heaven sweeping to succour you. Behold!" They dashed the sweat from their eyes and looked forth, and as they looked the pall of gloom was lifted, and in the golden glow of many shafted light they saw, not the legions of heaven indeed, but the regiments of Nodwengo rushing round the bend of the valley, as dogs rush upon a scent, with heads held low and spears outstretched. Hafela saw them also.
"Back to the Kapi," he cried, "there to die like men, for the wizardries of Hokosa have been too strong for us, and lost is this my last battle and the crown I came to seek." They obeyed, and all that were left of them, some 10,000 men, they ran to the Kapi and formed themselves upon it, ring upon ring, and here the soldiers of Nodwengo closed in upon them. Again, and for the last time, the voice of Hokosa rang out above the fray. "Nodwengo," he cried, "with my passing breath I charge you, have mercy
and spare these men, so many of them as will surrender. The day of bloodshed has gone by. The fray is finished. The cross has conquered. Let there be peace in the land."
All men heard him, for his piercing scream, echoed from the precipices, came to the ears of each. All men heard him, and even in that fierce hour of vengeance all obeyed. The spear that was poised was not thrown, and the carry lifted over the fallen did not descend to dash away his life.
"Hearken, Hafela,"
called the king, stepping forward from the ranks of the attackers.
"He whom you have set on high to bring defeat upon you charges me to give you peace, and in the name of the conquering cross I give peace. All who surrender shall dwell henceforth in my shadow, nor shall the head or heel of one of them be harmed, although their sin is great. One life only will I take, the life of that witch who brought your armies down upon me to burn my town and slay my people by thousands, and who but last night betrayed Hosa to his death of torment. All shall go free, I say, save the witch. And for you, you shall be given cattle and such servants as will cling to you to the number of 100, and driven from the land. Now, what say you? Will you yield or be slain? Swift with your answer, for the sun sinks, and ere it is set there must be an end in this way or in that."
The regiments of Hafela heard, and shouted in answer as within one voice:
"We take your mercy, King. We fought bravely while we could, and now we take your mercy, King."
"What say you, Hafela?" repeated Nodwengo, addressing the prince, who stood upon a point of rock above him in full sight of both armies. Hafela turned and looked at Hokosa hanging high in mid air.
"What say I?"
he answered in a slow and quiet voice.
"I say that the cross and its prophet have been too strong for me, and that I should have done well to follow the one and to listen to the counsel of the other. My brother, you tell me that I may go free, taking servants with me. I thank you, and I will go alone."
And setting the handle of his spear upon the rock, with a sudden movement he fell forward, transfixing his heart with its broad blade, and lay still.
"At least he died like one of the blood royal of the Sons of Fire," cried Nodwengo, while the army stood silent and awestruck, "and with the blood royal he shall be buried. Lay down your arms, you who followed him and fought for him, fearing nothing, and give over to me the witch, that she may be slain." "She hides under the tree yonder," cried a voice. "Go up and take her," said Nodwengo to some of his captains.
Now Noma, crouched on the ground beneath the tree, had seen and heard all that passed. Perceiving the captains making their way towards her through the lines of the soldiers, who opened out a path for them, she rose and for a moment stood bewildered. Then, as though drawn by some strange attraction, she turned, and seizing hold of the creeper that clung about it, she began to climb the tree of doom swiftly. Up she went while all men watched, higher and higher yet, till, passing out of the finger-like foliage, she reached the cross of dead wood whereto Hokosa hung, and placing her feet upon one arm of it, stood there, supporting herself by the broken top of the upright. Hokosa was not yet dead, though he was very near to death. Lifting his glazing eyes, he knew her, and said, speaking thickly: "What do you here, Noma, and wherefore have you come?"
"I come because you draw me," she answered, "and because they seek my life below." "Repent, repent," he whispered. "There is yet time, and Heaven is very merciful."
She heard, and a fury seized her.
"Be silent, dog!" she cried. "Having defied your God so long, shall I grovel to him at the last? Having hated you so much, shall I seek your forgiveness now? At least of one thing I am glad: it was I who brought you here, and with me and through me you shall die."
Then, placing one foot upon his bent head as if in scorn, she leaned forward, her long hair flying to the wind, and cursed Nodwengo and his people, naming them renegades and apostates, and cursed the soldiers of Hafela, naming them cowards, calling down upon them the malison of their ancestors. Hokosa heard and muttered:
"For your soul's sake, woman, repent, repent ere it be too late." "Repent!" she screamed, catching at his words. "Thus do I repent!"
and drawing the knife from her girdle, she leant over him and drove it hilt deep into his breast. Then, with a sudden movement, she sprang upwards and outwards into the air, and rushing down through 100 feet of space, was struck dead upon that very rock where the corpse of Hafela lay. Now, beneath the agony of the life, Hokosa lifted his head for the last time, crying in a great voice: "Messenger, I come! Be you my guide!" And with the words his soul passed. "All is over and ended," said a voice. "Soldiers, salute the king with the royal salute." "Nay," answered Nodwengo, "salute me not; salute the cross and him who hangs thereon." So, while the rays of the setting sun shone about it, regiment by regiment that great army rushed past the koppie, and pausing opposite to the cross and its burden, they rendered to it the royal salute of kings. Then the night fell, and thus, through the power of faith that now as of old is the only true and efficient magic, was accomplished the mission to the sons of fire of the saint and martyr Thomas Owen, and of his murderer and disciple, the wizard Hokosa. End of chapter 22. End of The Wizard by H. Rider Haggard.